Myths. Myths everywhere. But how do we find out what is a myth and what isn't? Let's summon a unicorn to decide that for us.
This video is part of a series for Everyday Feminism, a website dedicated to helping you
Complain about non-problems.
stand up to and break down everyday oppression.
You fat-phobic ableist. What if I am too fat to stand up?
Even in 2015, there's still a huge amount of controversy surrounding the wage gap.
Well, no shit there's going to be controversy, especially when you're presenting something that has been debunked well over a decade ago. Actually, here is a book published in 2005 that thoroughly debunks the wage gap. And yet the myth still exists today.
You've probably already heard the statistics surrounding women making less average income than men.
Well, no shit, different people working different hours in different jobs earn different amounts. You don't have to turn this into some sort of identity politics oppression Olympics, where it's people competing to see who can make the least amount of money and who can complain about it the most.
This disparity has been justified for a multitude of reasons.
Well, if there are a multitude of factors that can impact one's earnings, then of course there is a multitude of reasons to why different people earn different amounts.
Including women's choices in having children, and simply choosing lower-paying jobs out of preference.
And there is nothing wrong with that. People have the right to make these choices.
This video is going to break down these myths surrounding the wage gap and discuss why the idea of the wage gap being a myth is actually a myth. AKA the wage gap myth.
At this rate, we are going to have people say that biology is a myth. Oh.
According to a 2010 study done by the US Census Bureau, when we average the incomes of all working women of all races, their incomes are 78% of the average income of working men.
That is not surprising in the least once you consider the fact that women work less hours on average, and especially when you consider all the other factors that go into one's pay.
However, when we consider race, women of color earn considerably less than even their white counterparts.
Okay, let's hear that again, but I'm going to be zooming right into the image at the top left corner.
Women of color earn considerably less than even their white counterparts. In 2013, black women earned 64% of what white men were paid. The wage gap was even higher for Native American and Latino women who, in comparison to white men, earned 59% and 54% respectively.
Yet you completely ignore the Asians because doing so helps you say that white people are bad. You fucking racist.
While it can be useful to look at the incomes of men and women as a whole,
no, doing so isn't the slightest bit useful. What purpose does it serve, other than supporting your dogma and helping you be sexist?
It still doesn't account for things like hours worked, educational level, work experience, or the type of job.
Yes, and those factors, among many other things, can and do have major impacts on how much money someone earns.
However, even when we control for these factors, the gender pay gap still exists.
But it would also shrink significantly, which is what you have failed to mention. And that is only with the removal of 4 factors, let alone the many other ones that exist.
The US Bureau of Labor.
Before you continue speaking, let me once again draw attention to the image you have at the top left-hand corner, that saying, "Women, like men, only cheaper." Now, if that actually existed in reality, you would see many companies trying to get rid of as many male employees as they possibly can in favour of female employees because they are cheaper. But that doesn't really happen, doesn't it?
The US Bureau of Labor Statistics released a 2014 report examining the median weekly earnings of full-time wage and salary workers that took gender and job position into account. When type of job and job position are controlled for, the gender wage gap disparity still exists in every single field. Even when we take education into consideration, the pay gap still exists between men and women with the same level of education who majored in the same field.
But it decreases significantly. Again, you have failed to mention that simple fact, nor have you mentioned that there are many other variables that you are just ignoring.
I also want to note that the bulk of research on this subject perpetuates the gender binary by only focusing on men and women and not including gender nonconforming or non-binary individuals.
So first, feminists claim women are paid 77% of what men are paid because sexual discrimination, but then we actually do research on the matter to find that is false. And now you're saying, oh, that research is bad because it looks at people's sex. Are you fucking serious? When you're trying to claim sexual discrimination, no one cares about your gender, nor do they have a reason to. Also, how the fuck are you meant to conduct a study that actually accounts for these special snowflake genders? I'm serious, how the fuck do you do it? I have no fucking idea. Are you meant to ask everyone what their gender is upon employment, and then keep such information documented? It's just plain impractical.
Also, the statistics that I found on married couples were predominantly centered around heterosexual couples. Go figure.
It is practical to determine one's marital status. However, that doesn't really apply for determining whether someone's husband or wife is the same sex as them.
There are many sexist assumptions about women's labor that continue to contribute to wage inequality between men and women today.
At this point, it becomes very apparent that you're just looking for reasons to be pissed off.
I want to note that this is a very complicated subject, and I'm not going to be able to go into as much detail about this as I would like.
What constraints do you have? Who's stopping you?
But I am going to have all of my sources cited below if you want to check them out for yourself. Our current workforce is highly segregated by gender. This began in the late 1800s and 1900s when women entered the professional workforce and certain professions such as teaching, nursing, librarianship, clerical, and sales all became dominated by women. According to research done by Bergman, O'Neill, Blau, and various other researchers, feminized jobs, or jobs that are female-dominated, pay relatively lower wages than male-dominated jobs.
Okay then, look at the time period where women weren't working in those jobs, and tell me this. Were people working in those jobs still earning less than people working in other jobs? The answer to that question is most likely yes, as the value of those jobs then is probably no more than the value of those jobs now. And then there's the fact that women aren't forced to take these jobs. Just about anyone can compete for just about any job title.
We literally put a lower price on women's work than we do on men's work.
No, that is not the case. We are not putting a lower price on women's work. Women are taking up the lower priced work. The price of the work would be the same regardless of who's doing the work.
Even in areas of feminized labor, men still earn more than women. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, women are paid less than men in all occupations, whether they be female-dominated, male-dominated, or gender-balanced.
Well, that's because you are missing variables here. Let's take nursing, for example. A male in the field of nursing is likely to earn more than a female in the field of nursing. That is because a male in the field of nursing is more likely to be working in a management position, as the female is likely to be a nurse.
The wage gap is often dismissed as being a result of women's preferences and career choices. However, these preferences are often based on social and cultural factors that affect the lines of work that women go into and the way that work is valued.
Great job at conveniently ignoring the biological factors. But you're seriously just going to dismiss a woman's ability to make a free choice? Even if social and cultural factors were a big determinant, that still doesn't remove women's ability to deviate from that. Their choices are still their choices. For example, if I were to partake in binge drinking because of the culture surrounding alcohol, the only one responsible for that is me. There is no sense in trying to blame other people for your own decisions.
Women are told from birth that there are specific talents and preferences that girls are supposed to have, and they're nurtured and encouraged accordingly.
Congratulations, it's a boy. Oh, you're going to be in the military someday, son, I can see it. I've already prepared an attack helicopter for you. Yeah, no, that doesn't happen, you delusional fuck.
This is reinforced in all areas, including education.
That's odd. I somehow managed to miss the entire part of my education where the students are divided by sex and their classes are decided upon that. Maybe it's because it didn't happen.
The media.
Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life?
And eventually the workforce.
No, I am still sticking with the differences in the workforce are caused by the differences in choices.
This is actually an excellent time to mention STEM fields, which are generally perceived as being male jobs.
And this is an excellent time to mention that there is a 2-to-1 bias in favour of hiring women in the STEM fields.
If you look on the surface, the stereotype might seem pretty accurate because women make up about half of the overall workforce, but only make up 27% of science and engineering jobs. However, there are many social factors in place that contribute to this.
Maybe, just maybe, it's because less women are choosing to work in those jobs.
Such as a lack of encouragement in schools.
Schools have always been encouraging anyone who's interested to participate in STEM fields. But you don't want that. You want them to encourage women to participate in STEM fields. What is the point in that? If you want competent people to be in those fields, that is not the correct approach. But yet it's the approach that most people are pushing for.
A lack of representation of women scientists in the media.
The media represents scientists. If there are less women that choose to work in science, then there would be less female scientists represented in the media. Don't put the cart before the horse.
Marginalization and harassment within educational programs and the workplace, and straight-up discrimination by employers.
In the favour of women.
The third contributing factor to the wage gap is what's commonly referred to as the second shift. Studies done by Freeman and Shetcat consistently show that women spend more time doing domestic labor than their husbands, which frees up the husband's schedules to spend more time in the workplace. According to this research, modern women do about 2 to 3 times more household work, such as cooking, cleaning, or taking care of children, than men do.
So what? Do you want to remove the couple's ability to freely choose how they divide the domestic labour? Also, if there is a couple where the man has chosen a career that offers a higher pay, wouldn't it be a better idea to have the man do less domestic labour in that situation? Because if they were to divide it equally, as a couple, they would be earning less money.
However, in the last half a century, women have entered the workforce in droves. And while the proportion of working men to working women has pretty much evened out, statistically, we don't see the same evening out of household responsibility.
So you do think people should not have the freedom to choose how they divide their domestic labour?
Research from Argentine-American economist Graciela Chicholniski, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong, shows that unequal division of labor at home only adds to the gender wage gap. And while married women can obviously be excellent and devoted workers, doesn't it seem like dividing up household labor equally between partners might be a good way to go?
No, not really, because as I have explained, it could harm the financial situation of the both of them.
According to research done by Ginther, Waldvogel, and Winder, who apparently all came out of children's storybooks, married women who also have children experience more income inequality than single women with no kids. So basically, the moral of these statistics is, ladies, don't get married and have kids if you don't want your income to be affected.
Well, look at it this way. If you're taking long periods of time off of work, it is going to harm your career, regardless of why you're taking that time off.
The wage gap is most apparent in occupations with the highest pay and demand, where 24/7 availability is required.
Well, no shit, taking long periods of time off damages your career where you're meant to have 24/7 availability.
This is part of the reason why women with children are often excluded from the highest paying jobs, whereas men with children don't really have that problem.
because they need that money to provide for their family, and they haven't taken long periods of time off of their work.
Women are also typically considered higher cost workers because of the indirect labor costs associated with women workers. But almost all of these unequal labor costs stem from the unequal division of parenting that's generally assigned to women with children.
So not only you want to remove people's ability to freely choose how to clean their house, you also want to remove people's ability to freely choose how to raise their children.
It's assumed that women will be more likely to take time off work or leave their jobs because of family responsibilities.
So you want men to also take that time off and damage their careers as well.
And hey, maybe we should consider that equal division of labor thing that I discussed earlier. Just a thought.
Fucking wow.
Studies from Anchor and Hines show that while women were more likely to take off time from work than men, the differences were statistically insignificant. Another reason that women have been discriminated against in the workplace is because of the higher costs associated with paid maternity leave. While I want to point out that many pregnant women and mothers experience discrimination and income inequality in the workforce, this association of women with motherhood relies on the assumption that all women choose to or have the ability to have children.
Okay, firstly, if the woman is not a mother, then they are not costing the company any extra money to have her employed. Thus, her career won't be harmed by the pregnancies of other women. And I find it a bit odd for a woman to somehow accidentally take time off work due to a pregnancy, as opposed to getting an abortion, for example, which is a choice made by the woman. And people still have to deal with the consequences of taking long periods of time off of work, regardless of why they had taken that time off. For example, if a man was injured to the point where they have to take a long period of time off of work, his career still suffers as a result. He did not choose to be injured, but he was still the one that was injured, and he's still the one who has to deal with the consequences of it.
And I'm gonna say it, assuming that all women make the same life choices, quite frankly, is a little sexist.
But it's not assuming that all women make the same life choices. It is noticing the fact that different people make different choices in life, and if some women fall pregnant, then those women would have their careers impacted as a result.
The issue of women experiencing income inequality is a complicated one, but there are multiple steps we can take to fix it. These include, but are not limited to, equal division of household labor among couples,
removing the ability for couples to choose how they divide their household labor,
paid maternity and paternity leave.
That's not going to solve anything. That's only going to cost their employers more money, which could potentially further harm their career.
Better access to childcare.
Okay, childcare is actually an important thing, but what are you going to say once we actually have better childcare? We still need better childcare.
Legislation that brings women greater freedom in making their own choices in reproductive rights.
What is wrong with the current legislation? Don't women already have those rights? You haven't pointed out a single thing that can be objectively changed.
Anti-discrimination laws for women with disabilities, queer and trans women, and other sexual and gender minorities.
But isn't it already illegal to discriminate amongst any of those factors? The last thing people need is a shitty rushed government bill that serves to benefit the people in no way whatsoever. Great, now that I'm done with the video, I'm going to dedicate a couple minutes towards presenting the comments. If you are actually going to attempt to read the comments in this video, I highly suggest you pause this when necessary, because I've had to have them scroll reasonably fast in order to make this about 2 minutes long. I just had to take a moment to include this comment here as well, where this person goes on to claim that people that counter the wage gap present no evidence or reason whatsoever, which is false because a lot of people do. It's just that so many people have been doing it for so long, it is so much easier to say, look at all these other people that have already done it for me. Also, the patriarchy is dismissed on the same grounds that a god is dismissed. It's an extraordinary claim without evidence, and as you may well say, can't you just see the patriarchy everywhere? That is precisely the thing a Christian would say, can't you just see Jesus everywhere? So no, I do not believe that there is a magical invisible Illuminati in the sky that somehow controls all of our lives, and we can only see them if we believe in them hard enough. No more than I believe in a magical invisible Illuminati in our society that controls everything women do, and we cannot see them because we are either too privileged or have too much internalized misogyny. It's fucking ridiculous. If you're still here and you've got some time to burn, look at my playlist on the wage gap. It is excellent.